We've talked about some big notable brands on the show recently, like Nike, Aritzia, and Dick's Sporting Goods. But I know that so many of you are running smaller or early stage businesses, and this one's for you. But also, our guest today has a formula for creating viral TikTok content that I think can work for any size of brand. That guest is Gill Damborg. Gill is a creative director who's worked with big names like Arc'teryx, Saje Wellness, and Lush Cosmetics. She spent nearly 5 years at Lululemon as lead graphic designer in one of their biggest growth periods. And most recently, she was creative director at two women's health brands called Some Days and Isle. Some Days is a period pain relief product that have become famous for their period pain simulator. There was even an episode of This American Life about it. They travel the country to fairs and events, giving mostly men a chance to see if they're tough enough to handle typical menstrual cramps. A couple years ago, Some Days acquired a flailing period underwear company called Isle, as in the period aisle. And Gill was brought on to lead the campaign to bring Isle back to life. With a super mini production budget and zero ad spend, that is exactly what she did. In this episode, we're going to talk about that and how to have a massive impact on a tight budget. What do you do with a $20,000 budget or even a $5,000 budget? How can you make the most of your in-house team, and where should you tap outside expertise? Gill is also a founder. She co-owns a doula agency called Brood, spelled B-R-O-O-D, that provides birth and postpartum care for families. So she knows what it means to stretch a marketing budget in a meaningful way. Heads up, this episode was recorded in March 2025, so you'll hear us talking about tariff uncertainties, which, to be fair, in July 2025 still feel relevant. Here we go. Hi, Gill. Welcome to the podcast. Very happy to have you here. We're going to dive right in because it has been a tough few years for small businesses. And on this side of the border, the Canadian side, which we are on right now, it's about to get so much tougher in light of tariffs, which we apparently just went into effect. Who knows if they will still be in place by the time this airs? The whims of the U.S. president are very unpredictable. But on this podcast, we've talked to some really big brands, and you've worked at some really big brands. I mean, you've worked at Lululemon, where you were lead graphic designer during a pretty major growth period. You've worked at Lush and Saje and Arc'teryx, really all of the Vancouver darlings. But I think maybe right now it's so important to share stories from smaller brands that have done scrappier campaigns and seen huge results. We've had some earlier episodes, episode 1 and episode 2. We talked to Peak Design and Belly Welly that are great examples of low budget campaigns that went super viral. And I think we can learn a lot from those. And that's one of many reasons why I'm very excited to chat to you today. I'm also excited because you're a great storyteller and occasional stand-up comedian, no pressure to be funny, and a person with a viewpoint. And I'm guessing that viewpoint is what makes you a really desirable creative partner for a lot of the brands that you work with. So let's start right there. What I want to talk about today, you were brought on by Lux Perry, who is the founder of period care company Some Days, and they had just acquired another period brand called Period Aisle. So we've seen this huge wave of period care products in recent years, but they were kind of in this crazy moment. What was happening when you came into this business?
Yeah, I love all these period companies. Like, I'm thinking back to the 90s when, we first got our periods. I'm aging us right now. And how few products were available and how different it is now.
Oh my God, my mom gave me a pad that looked like a brick.
It's like a boat you put in your underwear. And by the way, it has forever chemicals in it. Good luck, I'm blushing from that intro. Thank you so much. I feel super excited to be here with you. And I love talking about this size business. I run one myself. So I think that there's something so interesting about how medium and small size businesses can do amazing things with, very small budgets. Let's just say that point blank.
Yeah.
I was brought on in 2024, so early last year. It feels like a million years ago and also yesterday. So we're 4 years post-pandemic. The brand Isle had been renamed and rebranded just previous to the pandemic starting. Great time, as you can imagine. And Luxe had just acquired the business, I think about 6 months before I joined. So they were like in the middle of this sort of like joining of teams and restructuring and figuring out what you want to keep and get rid of and all these things. So it's pretty intense time to join an organization, but having worked in startups, like I kind of love the day-to-day hectic chaos and just throw things against the wall vibe. So it was definitely in that moment when I came on board as the creative director. So leading 2 different brands, but Isle was really a major focus for Luxe at that time because the brand, although they've been around since the 90s, so these are the people that created the first reusable pair of period underwear. And back in the 90s, a reusable pad. Like if somebody told me to use a reusable when I was 13, I would have laughed in their face. No. So these people were like, these 2 women, Madeline and Suzanne, were really industry leaders and like really ahead of the curve. I'd say 30 years ahead of the curve, 20 years.
This is before Knix, before any of those big mainstream.
Exactly. So really when I came on, they'd been sort of in this situation where all these bigger brands were eating up a lot of the market share of the space and being bought up by larger corporations with multi-million-dollar budgets. And this is still a small local business with like $1,000 budgets, like really, really small. But we had to figure out a way to tell the story of this amalgamation or tell the story of Luxe being brought on and sort of where the company was at to try and gain some traction and gain new customers. So it was actually kind of a do or die feeling situation at that time.
Yeah. So it was dire. It was like Luxe had acquired this company, but maybe the company wasn't going to last. Was that what it felt like?
Yeah, it was like we had, 6 months to a year to turn things around, basically. And I think that it's a hard thing to talk about and it's a hard thing for people to admit. We'll get into that later, but it was like, okay, we need to do something viral. You love it when a boss or CEO is like, I need a viral campaign.
Everyone's favorite request.
But the thing is Luxe, as this incredible marketer, like naturally minded business person and marketer, by the way, who's like 32 years old, has gone viral multiple times. So for them to make this request, I was like, okay, we actually probably have to make this happen.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not messing around. Maybe talk about that. So Luxe loves a bold marketing campaign. And actually, I think the thing they're most known for was their period pain simulator, which went around and that got so much traction. Like I first heard about it on This American Life, not even knowing that this was a Canadian company based in Vancouver.
Yeah, so they started some days, also in the pandemic, and their business is all about like helping people with period pain, endometriosis, fibroids, whatever you got going on, some chronic illnesses, myself included. So those products, but what got them gaining popularity were these simulator videos, which is like basically you put 2 pads on your belly and it simulates period cramps from a scale of 1 to 10. And so they went to the Calgary Stampede and they were making cops and cowboys cry.
Wow.
So like millions of views, like totally catapulted this brand in business. They were like making it out of their house into a warehouse. Like they saw this growth. So, they understood how to make something go viral. And so when we had to change our focus to Isle and helping it sort of, come out of this darker period, I knew that they understand the formula for that. But I was brought on to make it happen.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit of a scary ask for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So you come in, there's this precedent of virality. Where do you even start? What was your starting place?
So Luxe had been inspired by this campaign by a very young TikToker marketer named Megan Lee. We can share the links to these things in the chat. And she ran this incredible viral campaign to save her boomer mom's lighting business. And like, it was super well done. It was totally Gen Z. She's basically like, how do I help my mom's like boring old lighting business survive? And she kind of goes through the story, the behind the scenes, and drags people through this awesome, amazing experience where she's like rebranding the business, doing all these things. So it's kind of like a mini business school and TikTok campaign. And Luxe was like, I want to do something like this. And we've been inspired by some other YouTube and TikTok marketers. So what's our hook? Like, how are we going to get people in? And so the hook of that one was my mom's business will fail if I don't do something about it. So simple, high stakes, immediately compelling, right? Like you're drawn in. You're like, first of all, that's your mom. Cool. Second of all, there's something wrong. How can I help? Right? So it really just started with Lux and I. Keep in mind the team's like, I think it's still only 10 people.
Wow.
And most of the team is Lux's family, brother, sister, mom, dad.
Wild.
And then there's like 5 of the rest of us doing all the other things, or 6 of us doing, warehouse, marketing, you name it. So Lux and I sat down and we were like, how can we take that idea and make it come to life for us? So like we mapped out the story arc. We were thinking about different hook ideas and scripting, and they wanted to do it in-house and wanted to do it themselves because they'd had some bad experiences hiring big agencies and doing more highly produced looking videos because their viral, like shitty phone videos had done so well. And they were like, I paid $20,000 to do this thing before and it flopped. So like, I don't want to do that. Yeah. But I personally was like, it actually takes more work to do this right than it looks. So I really wanted to bring on some local friends to come help put it together, which was really fun.
Get a little super team together. Okay.
Yes.
So the premise is what then?
The premise is, and we worked with Lauren from Kelly and Kelly, so they're a podcasting and storytelling studio here in Vancouver, Lauren Berkovich. She helped us hire a Gen Z videographer, editor to kind of bring that spin because God knows I know nothing about TikTok.
Everyone's favorite a Gen Z videographer.
Yes. Her name's Sarah. She is incredible. 5 of us, basically, there was about 5 of us on the team. We sat down, we were like, what do we actually need to do here? Like, what's the ask? And so knowing that Lux's family worked for them, we were like, well, maybe it should be, if I don't sell 20,000 pairs of underwear, I have to fire my family. Because technically, it's true. Everybody would be losing their jobs, including Lux's parents and brother and sister, if we didn't sell this many pairs of underwear by this date. So that was like, that's our hook.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah. Okay. So I see in the ad, I was targeted with the ad. It's Lux kind of walking through the warehouse. You see their family packing boxes behind them. And it, like you said, it has that scrappy look about it. But I think we all know that even a quote unquote low budget production, there still has a decent budget behind it. It's easy to look at something and think like this didn't cost anything, but yeah, it costs something to make.
That's the magic.
Scrappy. So so there was 5 of you involved. What does something like this cost? What are the pieces that need to be in place?
Yeah, so straight out of the gates, because we had an in-house creative team, we have designers, we have marketing, we have some writing. Everybody sort of wears a lot of hats. So we had that ability in-house. The only thing we needed budget for was filming and editing. And so Lauren, Sarah from Kelly and Kelly, they helped us with, amazing. They helped us with like so much. It seems so simple, but there was so much time spent on scripting. And everything was shot on an iPhone. So like we didn't have equipment costs. We didn't have props. We used the warehouse. We didn't have to pay actors or do hair and makeup. God knows none of us wore any of that anyways. Like it was the bodies in the warehouse, the products we have, and iPhone. So like that's where we saved a lot of money. And also we didn't need it because the visual needed to be that scrappy look. So we spent about, I want to say around 30,000 Canadian for creating 4 or 5 videos. Okay. That's it.
So like a little over 20K USD.
Yeah. And it didn't, that doesn't include the cost of the people that work there and the time that we spent doing it. But I'd say out of pocket and out of home expenses, like pretty decent.
Yeah.
We also didn't have any money for advertising. Like we didn't put any money into ads for this. This became an ad later because it performed so well.
So you didn't put any spend behind it on social?
And we'd pulled back completely from spending on social because, Facebook had changed their algorithm and it was totally screwed.
Yeah.
This was in the spring of last year of 2024. It wasn't until I think July or August that we put any money behind it. And it's still to this day our top performing ads, even though it's not an ad. which is amazing.
So wild. So what about it worked so well? Like, okay, and so the 30,000 was purely on that like sort of story development and the videographer, and maybe like cut like the edit itself.
Yeah.
So what made something like that that's just like so simple? What really made it work?
Yeah, I think there's this hilarious little formula that we pulled from this TikToker, and really the things, the key takeaways for me that made it really shine, and I think that you could apply to pretty much anything in marketing or brand, is the hook got you right away. The behind the scenes. I think people nowadays are so used to having like so much information, and they want to know what's really going on. And there's, as soon as there's that vulnerability piece, which is like, this business is failing, we need your help. Also, the product's great. So I think that like, we didn't even have to talk about the product that much. Like, it's PFAS free, it's ethically made, it's, you know, all of these amazing tick box, you know. So I think we didn't really have to talk about the product at all. We had to talk about what we were doing, how we were doing it, and just being really vulnerable. And I think that that really got people engaged. People really wanted to support. They were like, I'm buying a pair. I already have a pair. Let me get another pair. Like, people were really, really excited. And I think one of the main challenges for this brand that's been around since the 90s was new customer acquisition. Because let's face it, you only need like 3 to 5 pairs of period underwear every few years. Like, I had mine, gross, disgusting, TMI, for 10 years. 1 pair. Gross. Sorry, guys. Everybody's like, get me off here. So new customer acquisition and repurchasing was not happening.
Yeah.
And this campaign, that we saw that skyrocket, which was really amazing. We had people coming back before they'd even had their first periods to buy another pair to help with the campaign.
I mean, maybe that's another campaign. It's a testament to how well they work and how effective they are if after 10 years it's still doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So credit to Isle.
Totally. I also think there's something about the magic of their family being there, and like this kind of quirky business that's in a quirky space that's like kind of weird to talk about. I think that we hit a moment in time where the sort of elevating this message was I think the timing was totally there. Like, you can try and create a viral campaign and you might just miss the mark. I also think that like the family all has comedic timing, and even though nobody's a paid actor, there was something so funny and sweet and like delicious and joyful about this, you know, kind of scary business thing that was happening, but look how cute these people are and we want to help them. And I think that was just really genuine, and people saw that.
Yeah. And if I know you and I know Lauren's work too, you really would have fine-tuned that script, I'm guessing.
Oh, like days and days and days on one script. And we had a lot of different versions of things, and we would record like 4 different versions of the hook. We recorded 4 different versions of the second part of the script, or the ending, or the CTA. So like we did have to edit a lot in the, you know, the second half of the editing, and try out a few things to see what really worked. Because as you know, like combining the content and the words and the script with the visuals, that's where that like really extra special magic happened with the editing with Sarah. She was so incredible. And like using all this weird Gen Z stuff that I just didn't understand, like the Duolingo bird. I didn't know about that bird. It's in the first video. I didn't know what that reference was, but somebody else did. And I think that's where I know what I'm doing. And it's like, I'm not the one to make all these things happen. I knew Lauren. I knew Sarah was great. I knew Lux was great at being the front person, even though they really didn't want to be on camera. Like, we knew that the staff and the, you know, family were hilarious. So like, I feel like that's where my job was bringing all these people together to make this sort of little sparkle happen.
Do you think it would have worked as well if it hadn't been shot on iPhone?
No. So we actually tested both. And you just don't get the same, people know the camera movements. They know when you're zooming in on an iPhone, as I use my fingers, you know, to zoom in, versus on a fancy HD camera. They know what's wide format. They know how it squishes your face when you're doing certain angles, or the POV was really, really important for this video to make it feel behind the scenes scrappy, which it was. But like, that really added to that effect. And I wouldn't say it's necessary for everything, but I do think in this day and age, and what's really hard for me as a designer first is like chaos in visuals works really well. You know, it doesn't. Really beautifully designed feeds And you know what hurts me? That. They're like, screw fonts, screw branded stuff. We don't need a logo. Like, let's make it crazy and use Comic Sans. And like, that really works.
I'm wondering if there's going to be a backlash. Like, if the next generation of designers is going to be so exhausted by the chaos that they just come back to our generation of pristine.
Oh yeah. I think that things always come back around, and I'm really hoping there is some, but you know, the aesthetic of like chaos and clutter is definitely a part of the social zeitgeist, if you will.
It works. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you film this video, you edit it together with all the best parts, you test it, you know that iPhone works better, you put it out into the world only organically. What happened?
Yeah, so we didn't do, as far as like a campaign goes, the 4 videos were the main focus. We had 3 emails go out a week to our subscriber base. We pushed it out organically on our channels. We had a landing page with like basically a blog post about why we were doing this and why it was important, sort of our manifesto of like why this small business is being, you know, swallowed up by capitalism, the same old story that so many of us are feeling right now. And that was sort of it. And then we had like a ticker. So like every time we did an update, it was like, this is how many pairs sold. This is how many pairs sold. This is how many pairs sold. And we immediately saw a massive sales spike like the first week. And we checked in and did checks and balances every day and figured out how we wanted to update, when we wanted these new videos to go out. We adjusted them slightly based on how things were performing. But it was really like day to day, kind of hectic, chaotic, classic Lux, loves that. But we saw a really big sales spike. And what we noticed, as I said before, is that it was a lot of new customers, which was like something that had been that challenge for decades for Isle. And so we knew that we were speaking to new people. Mm-hmm. And so keeping that fresh perspective, keeping those updates live as much as possible, some talking head stuff that Lux did in between those main videos, talking about the products. So like the filler, I would call it, that we just did off the cuff, every week. So I'd say really we saw new brand loyalty. Our existing customers were down to help us because they already knew they loved us. And then we saw a month and a half in, we saw repeat customers happening before they'd even had their period, as I said, which was a huge win for us as well. So we just kept it going. And then when we hit, I think we might have extended it by a few weeks at some point because we were like, oh, we're not going to hit 20,000 by this day. But we'd made enough to like keep the business going and reinvest in product and like keep the wheels on the bus, which was really, really incredible.
So how many pairs did you end up selling in the end?
We ended up selling around 20,000, and we say pairs, but it was like products on the website. It wasn't necessarily, it could have been a pad, right, or, you know, the cramp cream, or it could have been the underwear, but all of those sales contributed. I think that we saw an increase, like our website traffic increased by 122%, and there was an 162% increase in sales. So we made over 800,000 USD.
Wow.
In I think under 4 months.
That's great for a small business.
Yeah. Really and like, honestly, things have continued on an uptrend for them, which is really incredible. Tariffs not included, you know, let's pray, buckle up, let's go. But I mean, like it was beyond successful. We did more sales than we did in Black Friday, for example, in that like first 3 weeks. So it was a testament to Lux's leadership in trying something kind of ballsy, to be honest. Like, especially locally, that's not really something that people were comfortable doing.
Yeah. I mean, it could have gone sideways. Like you could have, I mean, for a small business, $30,000 actually is not a small investment, even if it's scrappy. Like, you know,
I wish Brood had $30,000 for anything.
There's so many places where it could have gone sideways. What did you take from that? What was the big learning about like what works and what you're going to apply to future campaigns?
Yeah, I think for me, like as somebody who didn't use TikTok or isn't on social a lot, and as a marketer and creative director, it's that even though it looks really scrappy, it actually takes a lot of planning and scripting. If you spend a lot of time on scripting, you can really nail it and nail the tone. So I think that was a big learning. And you know, this might not have worked. Like it could have gone sideways. It could have fallen flat. People could have been mad and been like, why are you doing this? Like, don't tell me what to do. You know, like we're at the whims of like trolls on the internet half the time. So things could have just not worked. And then we would have not been working.
Yeah.
And then Lex would have fired their family.
Yes.
So. But it's like it's a timeless story. Like the story and what we were saying is something that I think will stand the test of time. It was the approach and the application and the editing and style that made it now. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. You mentioned Brood a moment ago, and that's your business that you run in addition to doing other things, which is, you can elaborate on this, but a family care agency, doulas, post.
Yes. Yes, I like to say I'm a doula dealer.
Doula dealer, yeah. Have you brought any of the learnings from this campaign over to Brood's marketing?
Yeah, I think myself personally as like a writer and a marketer, and something I always do is like the NTMI approach, which is like never too much information and being really like forward with what we're talking about and what is really symbiotic between Isle, Some Days, and Brood is it's all about reproductive health care and talking about things that like women traditionally and non-binary people, but like, let's just speak to who's generally in our audience here is they're not allowed to talk about these things. They're taboo. Like, don't talk about your periods or bleeding or cramps or pain or babies or bodies. And I think that what I apply across the board, including this campaign, is like, let's talk about the hard stuff, the gross stuff, the stuff that people don't really want to talk about. And I think that, that at least gets some eyeballs on it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. You've always been a big champion, I think, of like bringing up hard topics that people don't necessarily feel comfortable with, but we want to normalize. And it's interesting. I just published my annual predictions. We call it our crystal baller.
Yes,
and
I love those. Thank you so much for blessing us with that.
You're welcome. One of them is menopause, and we're seeing like the discourse around menopause really being normalized. Are you starting, as you've been in this industry, are you seeing the discourse around endometriosis, period pain, just like the fact that we all bleed in general? Is that starting to feel normalized?
I think so. I'm sure the new administration south of the border, trying to not let us say the word women and, periods or whatever he's trying to cancel out, will make it, I think it's going to inspire people to talk about it more. And I certainly do see people being more comfortable with talking about the things that they haven't traditionally. I think it's also because like you and I, not to age us again, are going through these things, right? Like menopause, perimenopause, body changes, having babies in a time where we get to deliver information in a fast and easy way on the internet. And so I think that it's only going to increase. How people have to get creative about it, we'll see. And like, for instance, there's certain things that are going to be blocked by Meta and Google and advertising. So you have to get creative about how you talk about healthcare for sure.
That I didn't even think about that, but that's a really good point. So the brands that you've been working with, Brood and Isle, you might not even be able to use those words the same way that you maybe couldn't use certain terms when you're advertising cannabis products on those platforms, which is really wild. Are there contingency plans going into place for if and when that happens?
I think that the best example, contingency plans, I'm like, not for me personally, ever. It's something I should probably do. I'm like flying by the seat of my pants, but I think, and a good example of something that we couldn't talk about recently at Some Days is the word endometriosis, like anywhere on the website.
Why?
Because Google was, something to do with advertising and Google not allowing certain claims to be made, certain health claims to be made. So those things are happening and it's kind of behind the scenes. I think the supplement industry is going to be hit really hard and like products like dealing with, I think it's not like high level people are talking about it. I think it's creativity and people are trying to figure out ways to work around all that. We'll see. We're in Canada, so we're lucky about that, especially with Brood, but I feel like pivoting is something we're used to doing by now. So. That dirty word.
It's being scrappy, but that is, I think I'm hearing more and more conversation about endometriosis as a problem that affects so many women and that so many women are just not willing to tolerate anymore. And the fact that we wouldn't be able to advertise a solution to someone is a little scary.
Classic. They don't want us to talk about our bodies and supporting one another. Am I right? So I'm going to be here Amanda, I'm going to be here doing it.
I'm glad to hear it.
For the rest of my life.
It's interesting that at the same time we're seeing this huge leap in women's sport. And so we're finally talking about women in this one arena, but we're still shutting down other aspects of our lived experience.
Yeah, they're not going to make it easier for us. So we're just going to have to keep fighting the good fight. The good thing is I see new businesses popping up and people talking about things. And maybe it's just because of the world that I'm in, but I'm certainly seeing that trend towards people talking about things that haven't traditionally been mentioned or cared about. So we'll be here doing that.
So you have your hand in lots of different pots, and you have for years. Like, you're often brought in to kind of solve a problem, do a campaign, and, then you move on to the next one. You were with Period Aisle some days for a year, and you've moved on. What are you working on now?
Well, I had a great year with Some Days in Aisle, and Lux is a dear friend of mine, and so are lots of the people that work there. So I'll always kind of be there. I joke that I'll just be showing up for team meetings on Tuesdays, whether they like it or not, for lunch. But I am currently freelancing. I've got a contract with Yogi Tea, which is really exciting. I just want to work in every industry.
Big Yogi Tea household.
Oh yeah. We're shipping some your way. I've been working with Arc'teryx over the last year. That's been wonderful, mostly with internal teams. And then the real focus, and one of the reasons I moved away from that big contract with Some Days in Aisle, is just to focus on Brood. We're in kind of a make or break moment. And with all of these changes coming down the pipeline in the economy, we were let's all three of us really focus on this and give it all we've got. So I'm really diving back into birth, babies, and postpartum. So yeah, you'll hear me talking about bodies a lot more.
Are we going to see a Gill Damborg campaign for Brood coming out sometime soon?
Yeah, we have $0 for that. So we're going to have to get scrappy, and that I will take lessons learned from the Aisle campaign for sure. Yeah, I think always advertising and trying to communicate what a doula is and why people should hire them, because families and parents need so much support and they're just not getting it. So that's definitely a big focus for me this year, and being able to, kind of narrow in on my own business baby is a real joy and privilege. So I'm really happy to be able to have that time again.
Yeah. Jill, you've always been plugged into culture and what's happening in the world of design and music. I think the first time I ever encountered you, you were probably on a stage singing many, many years ago. It makes me want to know, what is on your radar? Who are you watching in terms of brands, in terms of creativity? Where are you finding inspiration?
I was like, am I just not like everybody else watching White Lotus and Severance? Does that count? The theme song?
I haven't watched the new White Lotus yet, but I've heard people are not loving it as much.
Okay, I won't spoil it for anybody. Honestly, this is such a I love this question. It's such a classic question. And I'm like, what brands am I following? What designers? And truly for me, it's actually other people in the city specifically, like you, small business owners, generally women who are doing their own thing. Lux Perry, my business partners, our friends at Willet, we could list all of the amazing local brands being run by women, watching what they do with little budgets, time, energy and resources, Bloom, all of these companies, watching what these women do, often as parents with maybe a side hustle or two like me, watching what they do, with what they have is daily inspirational to me. So I'm just really, really proud to be a part of that community and keep tabs on what everybody's doing and find inspiration.
There is a pretty remarkable community of founders in Vancouver. And I think maybe because we're part of it, it seems like there's a particularly exceptional group of female founders in Vancouver. And I think a lot of us saw kind of that boom and bust of COVID. We were creating businesses, that really exploded. I know a lot of businesses struggled at the beginning of COVID, but a lot of us, we saw a huge bump at the beginning of COVID because we had businesses that were taking care of, children when in-laws couldn't. We were serving the active and outdoor industry, which saw a huge boom at the beginning of COVID. Willet with, everyone was splurging on their homes. And then 2 to 3 years after that, everyone had already bought their linen sheets. Everyone had bought their bikes. People's in-laws were coming back to take care of their children. Yeah. And so now we're seeing real creativity as people are sustaining those businesses and starting to come to the other side of it. And a lot of businesses closed, some businesses just didn't make it. And I think Isle is such a good example of a business that probably benefited from that boom when people are like, oh, I can have more self-care budget. And they're still riding that wave from what I can tell.
Yeah, you're so right. Like, I think the last 6 months and year, we've seen a lot of businesses close, and it's really upsetting and tragic and horrible to watch. And also we've seen, people come up with really innovative ways of getting their word out there. And I think if you've made it to now, like Brood or Isle or Some Days or you guys or whoever, any of our friends, I'm pretty sure we can do anything. And I don't think it's like a lean in and you can do it all, girlfriend, attitude, toxic vibes. I think it's kind of thinking outside of Vancouver, but also leaning on each other. So like, think globally, think how can we, be bigger than we are, but also leaning on each other, as far as our community here. And we are very lucky to have that.
We are. Yeah. You've been in this industry for a long time and you've worked in all different aspects of marketing. What is the best piece of brand or marketing advice that you've ever been given?
Oh, I have one line that I say all the time. And it's when I worked for Christine Day at the startup Luvo, which is like a frozen food company. I've worked in all the industries, guys. Yoga pants, frozen food, tea, essential oils, university education. Yeah, I love it. I'll try it all. I had a marketing director there, or VP marketing, Leora Schachter. She lives in New York, and she used to always say, she was kind of more on the digital side of things. She used to always say to me, why should I care? Why should I share?
Yeah.
So like talking about messaging, talking about campaigns, like tell me why I should care and why I should share it. Cause it's not even just about me as a person, wanting that thing. Like, why am I going to share it with other people? And there's another book that I've been reading called, oh God, now I'm going to forget it. Oh Lord, I'm gonna have to come back to this. It's about creating super fans. And I think that Leora was actually kind of onto that a long time ago. And there's this writer who came out with this book about creating super fans. And that's sort of that same idea is how do you get to that person to get them to want to share it without being asked to do that?
Yeah. Yeah. Get them to care enough.
Why should I care? Why should I share?
Yeah. It's why when we see a lot of companies that grew really fast just based on performance marketing, then maybe their only hook was like, we do this cheaper and we can get it to you faster. That only holds for so long. You have to actually get some traction. Otherwise, you're just buying customers forever. You need to get that brand piece. The fact that
it takes longer too.
Yeah.
Right? Like it takes longer to get the super fan. It could be years. Like for us, at Brood, it's been 3.5 years and we have super fans as of the last 6 months, year, and they're spreading the word. So I think it's also understanding that things aren't going to happen right away. And we're so used to getting things right away and having that, fast, relief. And I think that really something like Isle that's been around for 30 years, it's a testament to go maybe a little bit slower sometimes to get there. Although obviously a viral campaign.
took 30 years to get that viral campaign.
Totally. And Lex Berry being like, I don't care what people think. Let's talk about failure.
Which sometimes can really have traction. Failure works.
But, also failure is not a bad word. I don't know why it's seen as a bad word. We're all have challenges, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person or have a bad business. It means that things are hard and we need to figure out how to get through it.
Exactly. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Okay, Jill, where can people find you online? I know you've made it trickier recently, which I would also love to hear about.
Yes, not a big fan of the Zucks and the Musks and the I don't even need to say their names. I don't know why I even give them airtime, but I took my personal accounts down off social. But you can find Brood on Instagram because the business is still there at Brood Care, BROOD. And then you can find me on LinkedIn. I like that place, man. I know it's nerdy, but like,
it's a feel-good
I'm
channel.
hanging out there.
I spend a lot of time
Gillian Damborg. Yeah, we're there. We're hanging. It's like maybe a little toxic positivity, and I think I need some of that sometimes.
Yeah, okay. We'll go get our dose of toxic positivity when we look on LinkedIn. Amazing. Jill, thank you so much for your time. I love hearing your stories.
Thank you.
Can't wait to chat again.
Can't wait to see you. Thank you so much for having me.